Hello. Today I'm going to comment a newest, very important publication about how babies are affected in utero by antidepressants taken by their mothers. So for some time we already know that, for example, antiepileptics are affecting the baby before the birth in a mother's stomach, of course, because antiepileptic drugs have certain effects of neural cells, and they are good, of course, for preventing epileptic foci, but for developmental issues they are actually forbidden and advised to stop continuing the use of antiepileptic drugs in pregnancies. But we didn't know about that in antidepressants. So I'm talking here about recent publication of colleagues working in Helsinki, Finland. They're coming from Department of Clinical Neurophysiology, BABA Center, and also Neuroscience Center, Helsinki Institute of Life Sciences. As I mentioned in the beginning, we already know for quite a long time, and I also hear there are some processes of pregnant mother suing a pharmaceutical company not being transparent enough about the developmental effects that antiepileptic drugs can have on pregnancies. But since now we didn't actually have this size of research, especially from antidepressant drugs. Why it is so? Because previously you have to understand that when anyone is testing certain drug, usually first research is done on animals, but this is considered not to be acceptable to make a sample on humans, especially in human babies. Until now, we had only smaller size research of animal model, being on mice or rats, but on humans there were no such research. Meanwhile, people who were active in neuroscientific research figured out that you don't have to do this kind of biochemical analysis of brain cells to be able to conclude what is the effect on in utero of antidepressant drugs. I'm talking here about serotonin reuptake inhibitors. In majority of cases, it is considered that in order to prevent postpartum depression or problems that mother already have in her health, it is advisable to let her take antidepressants during the pregnancy in order to have better overall health and to minimize the effect on fetus. But people who are working in Helsinki figured out, together with some other researchers active in this field, that application of non-invasive EEG or MRI or fMRI can actually show us the amount of activity of certain centers in brain and calculate certain measures from that signal. I'm talking here about recording electroencephalogram. This is electrical signal produced by your brain, which also can be done in babies. And they actually recorded EEG while babies were sleeping. And also they did magnetic resonance imaging to figure out what kind of structures those babies developed and whether that differs with healthy babies whose mothers didn't take any kind of similar medication. In the end, the conclusion is that antidepressants, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, taken during the pregnancies actually visibly affected development under the influence of the same medication. How that happened? They find out, I'm going to read the conclusions in order not to mess with their description, which is better than mine, of course. Their study demonstrates that in utero exposure to mother's antiepileptic or antidepressant medication may affect development on the newborn brain networks. Novel mathematical models were developed to allow future research on how commonly used drugs or other environmental conditions affect the newborn's brain. They are talking here about both antidepressants and antiepileptic drugs, but I know that antiepileptic drugs effect is much more researched, and at the moment I'm aware at least of one process in France from group of mothers who were not informed, but they are doctors, nor gynecologists, nor GP, that amount of danger that antiepileptic drugs are imposing progressing to their pregnancies. Usually, those babies are suffering slower development. The problem is that you cannot spot that immediately after birth, but you're actually seeing that baby is lagging behind the peers. They concluded that it is due to antiepileptic drugs. Here, I want to focus specifically on antidepressant drugs because on this channel I'm usually talking a lot about new publications which are highlighting new conclusions and new research findings which are in connection to depression. They say, in prior studies, we have shown that changes in cortical activity across sleep states may provide important information on infants' neurological conditions. This is actually the conclusion by the lead author, Anton Tokariev. The study demonstrated that exposure to antiepileptics and antidepressants during the fetal period leads to widespread changes in the cortical networks, and these effects may be specific to the type of drug exposure. What was clinically significant in the findings was that some EEG findings linked to children's subsequent neurophysiological development. Stronger changes in neural networks predicted greater deviation in development at 2 years of age. Basically, they recorded EEG in sleep, and they analyzed certain measures which can be calculated from that electrical signal, which can give us information about how many centers in brain are communicating, whether they are forming networks or not, and what is the extent of that functional connection and communication. They call that novel methodology. They are actually applying some complexity measures that I mentioned here before, but this is novel in this regard, that this is applied on babies' EEG in sleep. So please share this information. I'm going to put down the link to original publication so you can see yourself. But this is extremely important to know for women who are planning pregnancy, who are pregnant, to consult and to minimize the risks for their newborns. Thank you for listening.